Okay, so I'm gonna just start this off. I pretty much know that I feel like every time I bring this stuff up, I kind of get emotional. But yeah, I know like I'm not even sure who needs to like hear this, but like just understand God knows what He's doing. So as I look at my own life, there's been a lot of stuff that I can get upset with, and when it's happening, it's frustrating. If I'm honest, it's frustrating as hell. But yeah, looking back on it, seeing like, hindsight, there's a lot of things that, in life we just don't understand what's happening, why it's happening. But God has a purpose for it, right? Um, so when I was younger, my mother had mental illness, and she struggled a lot with it. And as one of the recipients of it, uh, we just went through a lot, as children. But I just had my, I guess, kind of just an ugly relationship with my mother. And I used to always question and ask God, like, why do we have to go through this? Like, why can't we have our mother? And so, a lot of my friends, they had like mothers and stuff. They had people that was there with them, and I kind of understood a lot of like what my mother was going through somewhat. But it always hurt because I felt like my mother couldn't be there for us, and I felt like some of it was kind of attributed to her mental illness, but then also some of it was kind of, I think attributed to like I would say kind of like the thing of like she just really didn't have a hold of her responsibility. So, a lot of times when, we begged my father if we could go over there or whatnot, so I guess kind of rewinding, when my mother got sick with mental illness or whatnot, she just wasn't stable enough to keep me, my brother, and my sister. So at times when we were younger, we went to foster care or whatnot. And yeah, so like I said, when I was 5 years old, we ended up moving with my father, and so after his long battle with just trying to get us or whatever through the system and stuff, and especially being like a black man back in the like 80s at the time, it was just hard to be able to try to get that custody or whatever of your kids. So after whatever went on and we ended up moving with my father, I felt like going through the stuff with my mother just wasn't present. And like I said, some of it was attributed to her mental illness, but then I think some of it was just attributed to the fact that my mother had never learned responsibilities and stuff. So, my mother was like loved by everybody, like her neighbors, all my family members. A lot of my family members is like, "Ah, it's my favorite auntie. Aunt Jan's my favorite auntie and stuff." But for us as children, we really didn't receive that. So there was a lot of things that went on. And anyway, sparing some of the details, we just really didn't have a solid relationship with my mother, and my wife now. Uh, like when it came to Mother's Day, I struggled. I struggled a lot, like just trying to pick out a Mother's Day card, and because I felt like I was always one who was real and just spoke my heart, and you know, I just didn't have a good relationship with my mother, so it really wasn't nothing to say. And so with my wife, just seeing how much I struggled in the house, just looking for the Mother's Day cards, my wife started just picking them out. And I would just sign Happy Mother's Day because that's all I really wanted to tell her. And I love you, of course, but like, yeah, I just think, I don't know why it's so hard to get that out, but there was just a lot that, I went through and just we went through for real. And so, like, I just always wondered, like, why did, like, I just not had a great relationship with my mother. And so, um, yeah, I just, you know, like, just struggled for a while with that. But as I got older, I felt like God just kind of brought things back to my remembrance and stuff, right? So, um, I can remember, I think my sister was 12 years old, 3 years older than me. So I was 9. And I just remember us walking over my mother's house one day. And I remember us just talking, and we asked each other, like, if you get in trouble, who is it that you want to discipline you? You know what I'm saying? And get a whooping. Who you want to whoop you? And so we was both like, shoot, mama. You know what I'm saying? Mama's whoopings don't hurt. And so, we wanted mama's whoopings over daddy's whoopings. And so I remember my sister had got into it with my mother over something, and I think my mama promised her that next time that we came to visit, that she was gonna discipline my sister. So, I remember when the time came, and my sister was about to get disciplined. The thing that ended up happening was that my mother tried to get a belt and whoop my sister, but my sister grabbed my mother in the headlock, took the belt, and then she told our secret. She said, "Man, your whoopings don't hurt me. They don't hurt Damien either." But I remember, you know, like, I was mad at my sister, like, "Dang, man, you done told the secret." Like, we used to just act like her whoopings hurt and stuff or whatnot. But, you know, I feel like why that stuck out to me was I was always upset that, you know, God didn't let us have that relationship with my mother. And my mother and my father were split up at the time. They were separated, working through a divorce or whatnot. But I was always like, God, why didn't I have my mother? Why wasn't, she there like I wanted her to be, and, a bigger part of my life? But I think, the answers to it is just kind of like, I felt like God used the separation from my mother to be kind of a gift to us, to kind of walk us through, like, things that I felt like my mother just couldn't do, So as I think back, my sister was 12, I was 9 at the time. And so if my mother couldn't do nothing with my sister at 12 years old, as a boy, the strength that we have, just waits till I turned 12. And I just felt like, all of the things that my mother could have tried to do with us probably wouldn't have worked. You know what I'm saying? And the discipline. I felt like parenting would have, like, in some senses, felt like a joke. And so I think about it. Growing up in the projects, I think my mother didn't move out of Beecher Terrace until, shoot, I think, man, I was probably in my 30s or whatever, late 20s, early 30s or whatever. And my mother didn't move out of Beecher Terrace until late. And so I think it was probably maybe my late 20s or whatever when she moved out. But, I just think about the crowds and stuff that, as a kid, I was just hanging around everybody that I was around. I think, like, God used a broken relationship with my mother, like, to, like, kind of make us better in a sense, because I went and moved with my father. And, even though my father, how I felt like, like I said it, in the past, is that I felt like I was more so, I lived with my daddy, but I was kind of raised by the streets in a sense, man, because my father just wasn't there as far as just like, you know, sometimes walking us through things. I think he was there as much as he could be, but he had a lot going on, just trying to raise three kids, and then he also had a daughter on the side, and just going through the whole system and going through everything that was going on. Like, I think he had his own issues and stuff. And so, we didn't really get that part of my father. We didn't really get that part of my mother. But yeah, I think, even though my father, maybe if I look back, think that my father didn't do everything that he could have did, my father did, like, I guess, like I said, what he could had done or whatnot, and then also I think just kind of like being a young kid and stuff, I think I had a fear of my father because my father was this big guy, big tough guy. And so, you know, there was certain restraints because I remember like when I got locked up with a gun, like I called my sister and told my sister that I'm locked up. And then she was like, "Did you talk to daddy?" I'm like, "Man, I'm not calling daddy," because I was more afraid of my father than I was of the law and stuff. And so I think that God used that relationship to somehow put some restraints on some of the stuff that I did, because I did get out here and do a lot of foolishness. I did do a lot of stuff, but I think there was a limit to what I would do, right? So, uh, yeah, as I look back through it and I think through a lot of the stuff, like I can point fingers and think about a lot of the stuff that my father did do, a lot of the stuff my father didn't do, a lot of the stuff my mother did, a lot of the stuff she didn't do. As I think back, you know, everything that I felt like, my mother dropped the ball on, God had used in some way or another. You know what I'm saying? And I think, with us having to go with my father, I think it kind of helped us out a lot because, it did give us some sort of structure, some sort of rules or whatnot, which I felt like, being with my mother probably would have been a lot more chaos, man. I don't think my mother was probably built to raise young men. And so, even though, like just the tears and stuff that I shed and stuff is just thinking of like how God just worked through everything for real. And he uses stuff that we don't know that he will use. And so as I think back to about like my relationship with my father, yes, I wish I had a better relationship with my father, but also I think that the lack of a true relationship with my father helps me to love my sons even more, and like I said, I'm thankful. If my father need help today, I would still, help my father and stuff or whatever. I love my father, but like we still don't have that relationship. But I think the hard relationship that I had with my mother, the hard relationship that I had with my father, I think it makes me love more. Like even just seeing my wife, the way that she loves the boys, I'm able to see how a mother loves her kids and stuff. Um, and then just me as a father, um, like I haven't done everything perfect, I haven't been wrong in everything, but I know what it's like to mess up with your kids, have to apologize to your kids. I know what it's like to mess up with your wife and have to apologize to your wife. I know what it's like. There has been a lot of things that, I felt like even to this day, my father would not, kind of regard me as a man in some instances because, he wouldn't view me as being as tough as he thinks I should be or whatnot, or whatever the case is, just having to, you know, just deal with certain things. My father has a certain image, a bad image of what manhood is. And so, yeah, I understand that. I understand my father has his shortcomings. I love him. I love my mother, even though she's passed away. Yeah, but I think in life it took me to have to understand that everything that happens to us is not um, like hate. Like God's not punishing us. There's things that even as your child, if you tell your child to go do something, you know there's danger in the way. sometimes can remove those obstacles and stuff from them. And so I think sometimes God does us like it. And so, me doing this whole video, I don't know where you at in life, what you going through in life or whatever, but God knows what he's doing. So every situation that you in, I know it's hard when it comes down to it, but if you get through it and then you look back, you'll see the purpose and why certain things happen. So um yeah, I feel like I'm just kind of rambling on right now, but yeah, I just really wanted to tell you, like, yeah, like God knows what he's doing. So whatever stage you're going through in life, whatever you're going through in life, just understand that God is doing everything for a purpose and he knows what he's doing. So um, yeah, so just take it with stride and get through it. Talk to anybody if you need help. If you need anything, you know, somebody from the outside perspective looking in. But yeah, like God knows what he's doing and you'll be all right. So, I think the things that you go through in life, and the things that you lack in life a lot of times are, um, put there to help, even though you can't see that is there, for a reason or whatnot. So, yeah. So, but anyway, done rambling. I'm Damien, and I'll catch you in the next video. I'm out. Peace.